The glass tower slept past midnight. With the exception of a tiny pool of emergency light, motion sensors gave way to darkness, screens blinked to black, and elevators hushed. A cleaner crouched over a scuffed workbook in that blue-gray halo, using the tip of a calloused finger to trace formulas. Behind her, a keycard beeped. On gleaming marble, a shadow grew longer. The young, well-known, and incredibly wealthy owner of the building had returned for a misplaced phone. He stopped when he noticed a woman who wouldn't turn away, a notebook that appeared to be illegal, and an unnatural silhouette. His assumption at that moment would set off a series of events that would test everyone's true selves when the lights came on. Men like Adrian Cole were praised in the city. He transformed reverberating lobbies into living rooms, created co-working empires out of dilapidated warehouses, and persuaded a generation that steel and glass could be cozy. His name appeared on conference badges and donor walls. Like a constellation, his company's logo illuminated the rooftop. Early in the morning, Adrian paced in the direction of the executive floor, his shoes muttering along a hallway he had planned to be infinite. As he went, he listed issues such as an uncooperative investor, a project that had stalled, and an uncontrollable headline. "I love the grind," he told himself. He was awake if the building was. The corridor on the 23rd floor was painted blue by the emergency exit sign. Layla, a black woman in a well-worn uniform, was sitting on an upside-down bucket beneath it. At her feet was an open backpack from a thrift store. The workbook on her lap was creased and marked with highlighter. A broom leaned nearby in retreat like a flag. 2 hours ago, Layla's shift ended. If it weren't for the cacophony of alarms and snores coming from the one bedroom she shared with her sister's family, she would have gone home, as she should have. In July, the heat from the city destroyed the study tent she had made by taping plastic across a corner. She could only afford to borrow the silence from empty break rooms and hallways. The building's overtime timer turned off the lights early tonight. All right. The emergency sign was sufficient. She was still able to mentally map a circuit's flow. She still had the option to pursue a certification that offered a better option than working 3 jobs. Adrian's first observation was that she didn't appear to be in a panic. Not rebellious either. Simply steady, as though a flashlight had at last located the intended target. Radios crackling, footsteps quick, security came instinctively before anyone called. At this hour, it was always simple. Identify, record, remove. After years of carrying other people's mess, Layla stood up straight and closed her workbook. The guard took cues from Adrian, her backpack, and the name patch on her uniform. Words were slower than assumptions. An employee who worked late and stayed late. There's a bag on the ground. Everyone continued to whisper about a building that had been marked for theft last month. A woman whose existence had never been noticed until someone decided to consider it an issue. The guard pointed to the stairs. Like a lifeline, Layla reached for her notebook. At last, Adrian made a silent request for an explanation. He didn't have to. By hovering, focusing on the backpack first, and allowing silence to fall like blame, he established the tone. An hour later, there was a report on someone's whereabouts. HR was notified. Security intervention is necessary. Materials are unknown. The employee was discovered loitering in low light after hours. It was a neat word. It didn't have an effect. On a bus that smelled like the rain from the previous night, Layla made her way home while reliving 1,000 minor humiliations that had no witnesses, no paperwork, and no names. The workbook's cover stated, Electrical Systems and Safety Level 2, which the report failed to mention. It was pencil, not fingerprints, that smudged the pages. 3 bus transfer receipts, 2 hand-scored practice tests, and a note reminding her to buy earplugs if she could find the inexpensive kind at the corner store were tucked away between chapters 6 and 7. Since records rarely care about context, none of this was included in the record. Rumors did what they always do at dawn. Something suspicious had been found in the possession of a cleaner. It had been a heavy backpack. There had been a guard on duty. Every recounting dulled humanity and polished suspicion. There was never a need for the center stereotype to speak. The building experienced a different type of storm by midday. The city's grid was under stress due to a heat wave. The blocks surrounding the tower flickered. Whispering awake were the rooftop generators. Elevators made a hiccup. The fourth floor conference center, crowded with paying customers and business associates, grew hazy. Because backup loads are picky and money knows where to stand, the call center, one floor down, where deadlines sprinted ahead of people, continued to operate. Adrian watched his phone's power graphs change like the lines on a seismograph. The city owned the electricity, but he owned the steel and the tales it told. He considered brittle things: brand perception, investor confidence, and the appearance of control that vanishes in an unplanned hour. In addition, he wondered why he was still thinking about the woman from last night. Liability, he told himself. He was aware that it wasn't. Layla's shoulders were taut, and her uniform was new when she came back for the evening shift. There may be HR questions later, according to her supervisor. She gave a nod and continued walking. The breath of the building had changed. In a new key, machines hummed. Fans refused to cooperate somewhere. A light clicked frantically somewhere else, like a glass-trapped moth. A maintenance technician scowled at a smoking power strip beneath a line of rented monitors on 16. Tape, the universal sacrifice to broken gods, was what he reached for. Layla stopped, listening to the chapters from last night in her mind as her eyes followed the wires. She inquired as to whether the load on that strip exceeded safe limits, but she didn't say anything because she wasn't asked to speak. With a smile that said, "Don't worry about it," the tech shrugged. Before anyone even swore, the strip coughed, sparks flew, and a small flame licked outward a minute later. The sensors in the building breathed. This was too small for sprinklers to wake up, so they remained silent. Before asking permission, Layla made a move. The flame was extinguished by the rag. Instead of yanking in panic, the cable was unplugged, with a patient twist. To redistribute the load, monitors were raised one at a time. The technician gazed at his own hands. None of it had occurred to him. She had. She moved as if she had read about small-scale fires that ended with unstoppable sirens. The conference AV cut out in the middle of the presentation on the floor above, which felt like oxygen thinning to those wearing suits. The microphone died while Adrian was on stage pitching a resilience story. He watched the screens blink to a courteous blue, then grinned like a man with backups for backups. The chairs in the audience moved, first with patience and then with uneasiness. A small control room resembling a cockpit blinked behind the ballroom. Only a tiny panel marked "Emergency" stayed lit. Layla entered cautiously but confidently. During her breaks, she had studied the building schematics because the squares and lines helped her to relax. She ran her finger down the backup line that supplied power to the AV amplifiers. Perhaps the amps would have gone hungry if the corridor on 16 had drawn more than it had. Using the back of her hand, she traced heat in the cables before rerouting an unnecessary office circuit through a spare breaker to balance the load. She had mentally rehearsed the sequence 100 times, so she did it. Because there was no room for heroism in the stories that were told about her, she did it in silence. They did not give thanks to the universe when the screens returned. They just did as they were told. The conference took a breath. The applause came back for the person on stage who continued to speak despite the chaos. Not for her. But someone had noticed. As Layla left the control room like a vanishing wave, the junior facilities coordinator, who was fresh enough to notice what veterans miss, watched. He recalled everything without saying a word. The grid dipped again late that evening. The building let out a deeper groan this time. By doing nothing, a stuck elevator expressed its distress. A teenager in a catering apron was inside, pressing his hands against a wall and trying not to cry. Air handlers shuddered on 18. Temperature crept into the data closet. Generators in the lobby swallowed dust and continued to run. The emergency response plan was stored on intranet pages and in binders. It assumed that people had the luxury of reading and spoken bullet points. Adrian had a team of crisis consultants and architects who would constantly bombard him with possibilities. However, the building failed to seek executives during the first few critical minutes. It searched for whoever had moved. Before anyone radioed the fault, Layla sensed it. The obstinate silence of the elevator revealed a tale. Her gate said she belonged as she made her way to the service panel. She requested that they maintain the line open, not as an order, but as a link between hearts pounding in separate rooms, and radioed the lobby to record the car's precise location. She didn't have to open doors or act heroically. When the AI grid faltered back, she had to keep the car's power steady and prevent a surge. The balance she had studied as diagrams came to life in the control room, with the patience of someone who